hit someone.
There we go. I just want to make sure I got that started.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let me pull up the, gonna share my screen. Thank you for making me capable of doing that. All right. Okay. Let's see. Can you guys see the mission retreat committee? I
Yep.
can't see. You can see. Okay.
Yeah, it's unlike Google Meet in that you have to look at it actually on your computer, the document on your computer. It doesn't
Okay.
put it in the window for you, but we can see it.
Okay. Okay. Well, that works. That's good. All right. So we wanted to make sure this was recorded so that Michelle and Minnie, you guys can join us and stay up to date with the information that we've been able to we'll be discussing today. So we started with prayer a little bit and introductions. We kind of skipped since Marianne, Stephanie, and I know each other fairly well. But the purpose of the committee truly is to really facilitate a conversation so that we can host well. We really want to develop an idea and implement an idea that where we can honor both the people that are coming to visit Nueva Vida and also the people that would be hosting the people visiting us, including our Guatemalan staff, our families, our children, and us as not having a sturdy quantity of administrative staff. So really honoring those challenges, but also those blessings, and so that we can host well as we develop this opportunity for people to come down and see Nueva Vida in Guatemala. I also want to ensure that we have really realistic expectations. I was sharing with Steph and Marianne earlier that they know me well enough to know that realistic expectations is not my strength. So we really want to develop something that's realistic, something that honors expectations, again, on both sides of the coin. We really want to honor both the visitors and the people hosting and the community hosting Nueva Vida being that community. So really want to set realistic expectations. And I think a multifaceted committee can do that well. So people that have never been to Guatemala, their voices are very important so that we can hear from their perspective of what they might expect. And then those of us that have been in Guatemala, and some of us have been so many times that I almost kind of forget some of those cultural and diverse experiences because it's part of my life so much now. So I think there's so many things that each one of you guys can contribute to this conversation that allows for really good hosting and really good ministry to our visitors. We really want to minister to people coming to see us and not just receive from people coming to see us. I think that generally can be the expectation, but we really want to have that mutually beneficial relationship amongst us and with our people that do get to come and see us. And then also the practically assist with development of ideas. So that's why I wanted to have these meetings and discussions. There's also kind of a list of things that we still need to develop that I would greatly appreciate your support in. So as a committee, those are some of the purposes and the reasons for me wanting to initiate with you guys and asking you to be a part of this. So each one of you are here for a very particular reason, and I'm very grateful for your guys' presence on this committee. It means a great deal to me, and I'm very excited about it because this is a development of an idea that's been coming for many months. I could probably say even years, actually, pretty confidently, because just talking a little bit about the history of this idea, it really developed over, even when I started coming to Guatemala in 2010 and 2011, and just have met a lot of people coming for short-term trips. And then as Nueva Vida developed, and also with Got Ministries and just hosting so many people, so many students coming down, seeing what their experience was like. And then as Nueva Vida developed, Stephanie and I really seeing more of the team approach in um, how well and maybe not so well teams and visitors have been received in specifically in our small little community in Guatemala, but then also the community of other nonprofits and ministries in the villages in the country. So we that's really kind of what birthed this idea of a mission retreat versus a team and an active service oriented experience. Stephanie and I have been working a lot. She mentioned about 10 times we met at least about this specific topic. And we've definitely have just been pretty passionate about the development of this idea. And so I'm really grateful for her partnership up to this point and excited that she's on the committee as well. But we have also met with a woman named Olivia, who is the director of a nonprofit ministry called Casa David. It's a hospitality ministry, very similar to Ronald McDonald House. And so they have a really wonderful ministry, and we've just really appreciated the partnership with her. She's Guatemalan, so she also has a very different, not a very different, but a different perspective that really offers a lot to the conversation. So she's helped us develop the ideas that we have so far. And Steph, I didn't know if there was anything that I missed that you'd like to share a little bit about your part, kind of what you've experienced up to this point that's influenced the history.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you covered most everything, and even some of the stuff that I sorry guys, I said some stuff in Google Meet and I can't remember what I said. But no, I'm excited because Megan mentioned, we've met probably 10 times, and I do think we have a lot of really good information. But at this point, it's very abstract for us. And so where we are, I think, is having some outside help will help us like bring it down to more concrete terms, give us some actual like feet on the ground feeling, because it feels like it's floating up here in space. So I'm just really excited to get your guys' perspectives and just some new ideas or some new help bringing it down to earth.
Yeah. Yes. Amen. I agree with that wholeheartedly. So talk a little bit about what we've developed so far, because I really wanted to make sure that we weren't kind of repeating what's already been done, or we, like I said, we've talked about this a lot. We've developed this as much as we could to a realistic capacity. And now I feel like as a committee, we can take it from here. But some of the things that we have done so far, or that we've at least identified as far as the structure goes, is that we really want to make sure that at least the mentality was that at least I would be able to be in Guatemala to host and to initiate the hosting and facilitate the hosting for our teams. That doesn't mean that I would be the only one on the ground hosting, but that means that at least that would kind of tailor the timeline. And so as of right now, we have 3 times a year when we're expecting to start in 2024, where we would have a 2-week timeline, and we could have 2 1-week groups of visitors come to Guatemala, and we would host them during that time. So there's a 2-week timeline in March, a 2-week timeline in June, and a 2-week timeline in November. The reason that we chose those timelines and those months is trying to navigate as many kind of, when I've talked to donors, when I've talked to people who are interested in coming to Guatemala, those tend to be timelines that could work in their schedule. But also, most importantly, their timelines in months that seem to work well with the Guatemalan school schedule. Our school goes from January to October. And so we wanted to honor that timeline and not completely disrupt the entire structure of that our Guatemalan staff are working hard to do, and not interrupting the learning that our kids are experiencing and the therapy that they're experiencing. So we really wanted to honor those as much as possible. So I believe there'd be probably a team, like a small team of me and maybe somebody else hosting these visitors. And I think I don't have a specific limit, but generally what I'm thinking is up to 8 people at a time. I'm not talking about a big group. I'm not talking about a group of 20. And really the focus up to this point has been, as far as communication goes, is friends of the ministry, specifically the churches that we already partner with, their missions committees, and donors that have been with the ministry for a long time, and our board members. Those have been the 3 main groups that we've been focusing the communication about these possibilities, focusing my communication and the ministry's communication with them. As far as the logistics, kind of going back to the structure, the logistic coordination, that's something for us to continue to tease out a little bit. But I think really how much Nueva Vida wants to be involved in the details of their schedule and the details of their housing and transportation is a question for us to discuss further. But that is, we have a lot of ideas on, whether they have Spanish classes. We have ideas on kind of how we would structure the daytime for them to be with us and how they would participate when the ministry. But outside of that, like the transportation and the housing options, how much we want to be involved due to very specific expectations for each group that might come to see us. I want to honor that, but also acknowledge our limitations as we don't have a significant administration staff to receive people. So that can be a conversation for later. One of the things that I think is important is that kind of just talking about how we have kind of structured the trip so far. We have kind of a pre-trip focus, a during the trip focus, and a post-trip focus, and really kind of specific goals that we would love to collaborate and accomplish. And what I mean by that is we really would love to have some investment from our visitors prior to them coming to Guatemala. I think it's really important. I know generally this idea of a mission retreat is very countercultural to the team-oriented mentality and when I say team-oriented mentality, what I really mean is a larger group of people from a church or from an organization coming down, expecting every hour of their day to be planned and the food to be very organized and orchestrated, but then also they would have a full schedule from morning to night, exhausted by the end of the week, painting or doing something with their hands, painting, building stoves, building houses. That kind of focus of the trip is what I mean when I say teams, where they kind of just go from their hotel to the site to work and then come back to the hotel and come back to the States. So that's when I say team, that's really more what I mean. The mission retreat is very countercultural because it's really focused on three major areas, and we'll talk about these a little bit more, but that's spiritual formation, advocacy and relationship, and culture and history. And so really it's about developing that relationship. But as we talk about the pre, during, and post kind of structure, it's really to enhance that opportunity, enhance the capacity for our goals to be achieved as far as connecting with the people and heart of the ministry. So we really want, before people come down, we want them to know who we are. We want them to know a little bit about us and Guatemala, and not just a list of logistics that they need to navigate, how to pack, but that would be obviously a part of it. But during the pre-trip conversations, we actually are hoping to have about 3 meetings. And part of that would be with spiritual formation involved, the relationship and advocacy, and also the history and culture, because we really want them to just have a little bit of a nugget of information or an idea of what they're getting into, so that we can, again, have the really good realistic expectations. So during the trip, it's really to experience the expansiveness of God and to see how he works in other cultures and communities, and to fall in love with God, also with the ministry and vision of Nueva Vida. Just we want them to connect with who we are as Nueva Vida, but most importantly, we want them to have a time of connection with God, which is why I think the development of the word retreat kind of came to pass, is that we really want to minister and to facilitate a space that's safe and exciting and different for people to experience God. And then after is really the long-term impact of a trip, like what we're hoping to provide, and encourage them to serve. It's not so much that the expectations they come back to Guatemala and serve. That would be great, but it's not realistic. What we really want, because we are a nonprofit ministry specifically focused on ministry to people and families impacted by disability and special needs, we really want to encourage people to live that out in their own communities and return home with the same passion that they see us serving our families that we have the privilege to serve, but to return home and to find a space to minister to families and to children and to people with living with disabilities. So really giving the glory to God and truly kind of making space to ask what the Lord wants to do with that time that they were in Guatemala. So that's a kind of a little bit about the difference and how we would want to structure our pre, during, and post, and some of the goals and how we would even expect that. So 3 meetings would be kind of the hope and expectation. We can talk a little bit about what that looks like and what is realistic. And then during the week on the ground in Guatemala, we would host them, and I'll show you a little bit about what kind of a schedule might look like. And then after, we are hoping for a 1.5 hour meeting a couple weeks after the trip to debrief and to really steep in what God's doing. So that's a little bit of the structure and what we've kind of developed so far. And then lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the focus areas. So I mentioned that there's 3 main focus areas of the mission retreats that we've kind of developed so far. The relationship and advocacy is the relationship with Nueva Vida and the relationship with us individually, and that it can be a 2-way street. It's not just them coming to serve and to leave without really developing relationships or getting to know who we are as people, broken and obedient and loving the Lord. We want to really get to know them, and we want them to really get to know us. And so building those bridges between the Guatemalan staff as well and our families with our supporters and with our visitors. And then also just developing and supporting an accurate advocacy for who we are. I think that's really important. It's something that we've been working on with our boards, and we'll continue, the board of directors, and that I'm going to continue to be investing in. But that we have a very clear message, and that people can share accurately, like really who we are. We're not just a school anymore. We've been a school for 20 years, but what we really want to encourage is an accurate awareness of who we are, to see the whole dynamic of the ministry and to be able to share who we are. And so part of that advocacy really requires the investment to get to know us and us to get to know them. So that's part of that relationship and advocacy goal or focus. As far as the culture and history, I think, again, one of the things that we've seen with teams that I've learned from is that there's not a lot of knowledge always of the beauty of Guatemala or the culture of Guatemala or the history of Guatemala. And I'm not expecting anybody to leave with, a 20-point, bullet point idea of, here's 14 really important facts about culture and history of Guatemala. But I do really think it's important to know how the history and the culture within Guatemala and within Santa Maria de Jesus and within Antigua, how it influences how we serve our families. And that's ultimately, it's not just knowing, the culture and history of Guatemala or these different villages, but it's really about knowing how that relates to how we serve and how intentional we want to be in Nueva Vida to honor that cultural difference, but also be who we are created to be, and be different. We're called to be different as well as Christians. And so I think it's important to take into consideration how that influences how we serve. And then also there's just perspectives on disability, the dynamic of the family, the value of education. All those things greatly are just extremely influential on our relationships with our families. And I think that's a very honoring way. A way to honor our families and our community is by sharing a little bit more about the history and the culture and how that does influence the dynamic of how they receive Nueva Vida and how they receive disability, and how they receive extranjeros or foreigners coming into their community. And so I think it really helps also build, going back to that relationship piece, if we can facilitate a good cultural awareness or, a basic cultural awareness of history and cultural influences, I think that can support a better relationship building as well. So I think that's a really important part of this mission retreat. And then the third and final, but definitely not the least important, it's the very, very, very most important, is the spiritual formation. And we really want to create a space, like I mentioned earlier, for the visitors to come and draw near to the Lord and for us to come together as a community of God and to study his word. And Stephanie's been working very, very hard. And I know she's very, very dedicated to continuing to develop the idea because it's come so far. But really it's about, what does the Bible say about disability and the ministry and suffering? I think that's extremely important. I think we like to kind of, I don't know, it's a hard topic. It's a really hard topic. And I think it's a really beautiful topic. And because it very much impacts and influences everything we do in Nueva Vida. And so it's a way to share the heart of Nueva Vida through biblical principles and through studying the word and discussing those hard things, like suffering, like disability. And there's, our gifts and what that looks like. And so there's a lot of different bullet points or different areas, but some of the topics and stuff, please feel free to jump in. But some of the main foci that I've seen in her work so far is like talking about the creation, talking about our gifts, talking about causation, even as it relates to disability and healing. There's a lot of amazing things to tease out in there and just discuss. And I'm so excited because I love talking about that because it's just so important and it does very much influence. Makes me emotional. It does. It influences everything we do. We really want to honor God in what we do, and we really want to honor our families. And I think when we have the privilege and time and opportunity to pray, I think sometimes we assume a prayer needs to look a certain way or needs to be prayed for healing of a certain thing. And so that's the beauty of Nueva Vida, is that we just get to be and to let the Lord lead. And so ways that Steph was thinking about facilitating that is through the prayer walks, Lectio Divina, devotionals, and different testimonies. So, Steph, do you want to share more or clarify any of those things that you've been working on?
Yeah, I mean, that actually is a really good summary. And yeah, I'm just excited because I mean, we all know these aren't easy topics and they're not always comfortable topics for everybody. And they're not topics where we necessarily have all the answers. So I am excited to kind of facilitate a safe space where we can talk about these things, give some different perspectives. And also, so in my mind, I have two things that are really strong on my heart. Is one, moving us away from a pitying, for lack of a better term, pitying people that are different than us, whether that's because they're poor or because they have disabilities or whatever. I feel like that fits our culture, our wow, the place where we serve. Words are not coming to me really well. So I want to see that, but also I want us to build a culture within the team and within the trip of, we are all part of God's family, and it's not just Americans coming to serve, but that we're in this together, serving each other, learning from each other as equals. And one group isn't coming because they're better than the other, like that kind of mentality. So those are kind of some of the things that are constantly playing in my background while I'm developing these, and kind of developing through the pre-trip, during trip, post-trip, kind of some devotionals that will help us move through that process of maybe moving away from some of those white savior mentalities that we've learned. So I don't know if that.
Thank you. Yeah. So as of right now, I have a little bit more content to share with you, and as it relates to kind of a little bit more structural kind of scheduling things. But before I get to that, I really just want to share that right now, this is the list of people that have very directly communicated interest in coming to see Nueva Vida. So there's quite a few. Now, words are, it's very exciting to say I would love to come to Guatemala, and there's a lot of people that have said that to me. Actually, I would love to hear more of it, but these people have directly kind of repeatedly communicated an interest, and so I've kind of tried to filter out a reasonable reasonable people that we could actually depend upon coming. And just want you guys to know that there are people interested, that there are many opportunities for us to develop this, and it's exciting because all of these people, I've got kind of whether they're higher interest or mid interest and things like that. I think there's even a few that, as I look at this list again, that are missing, because I know Mindy was considering coming, as well as, well, the whole board, hopefully, but I know the Ashworths were also very much thinking about coming, depending on how things go for them. So anywho, all that to say, there's definitely a significant amount of interest. And right now, the dates, and I think this might, at least the March dates might need to change based upon my maternity leave, and I just don't know how everything's gonna fall. I would not want, I don't know how much I would want to jump right into a mission retreat right after maternity leave, but we'll see what God wants to do with all those things. But as of right now, these are the dates that I at least had kind of penciled in my brain, taking into consideration the structure of the Guatemalan timeline and my timeline, mostly up to this point, because those have been the main two factors so far. So, but there's still to be there's still to be determined truly. But just to kind of give you guys an idea of when I was thinking about having this all in 2024.
Are those the same dates that we received as a board? Like, they haven't changed, have
Yes.
they?
They haven't changed since that. No, I've kept those the same. The only, as I just was putting them up in this document, I was like, oh, well, the 9th, I haven't actually like looked at a calendar to look when my end of my maternity leave would exactly be if baby comes right at, I can't imagine my baby would be punctual at all if the baby takes after me in any capacity. So we'll see. But yeah, just wanted to give you guys some dates and kind of awareness of what that would look like. All right. Okay, so questions before I kind of show you what we've developed for structure, as far as timeline and kind of what we're thinking about, what we would look like, what like a week down on the ground would look like. But Marianne and Steph, ask me, talk to me, challenge me, please. What are you thinking?
I know you had said that some of the trips might have a different focus, so that I think it was the November trip would be a little bit more kind of hands-on, with the idea being that the children won't be in the school at that time since they'll be on holiday. And I guess just even thinking of like, if Spanish language is an interest of some of the groups, could like one of the trips be focused on like language as well, or something like that?
Love it. Yes. Yes. So March and June are our dates when kids are in school. So we've experienced so far, we've had some teams that have come and done more, or visitors that have come and done more action oriented, more service oriented activities. And it's been, as much as we have tried to avoid the disruption, it's been very disruptive. And so for good reason, for good things, but just ultimately it is pretty disruptive. So in November, the timeline is usually most of our kids, there's fewer kids coming to the center. Therapy is kind of wrapping up at that point, and we're doing tutoring. And so there's much fewer kids, which is kind of less exciting to see, but ultimately gives more space for a service-oriented trip. You're correct, Marianne. That would be more in November. Mm-hmm.
And I think my question also is, I understand the kind of countercultural shift in turning to ministering to the people who are participating in the trip, who are coming to Guatemala. But I think that kind of when I spoke to Michelle and John about this, there's like a real desire to be helpful as well. And I think, what is the concept that what are the teams offering in this kind of exchange that is happening?
Yes. Yeah. I don't have a specific answer to you outside of their ministry and their presence, their prayer you know, as far as if we're talking more about like hands-on product that they could see a big difference when they leave, like painting or something like that. The March and June trips, as of right now, the way it's structured or the way that we're kind of thinking about it, it would be less so that it would be more ministering to us and us ministering to them. It would be prayers. It would be
Ministering to us, to ministering to how?
yeah. Well, sharing testimonies is one of the ways that I see as a huge opportunity for ministry. And I think it's a cool cross cultural conversation as far as just beliefs and what we see every day with disability, but then also kind of having people come and pour it into us as well and encourage us and pray over us. I think that's a huge ministry part of the presence of people coming down to Nueva Vida. Steph, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it really is the idea that it would be more relationship building. So it is a lot of prayer and testimony, conversational type ministry to each other, learning and developing those relationships. We also want to do a meal together. So there would be opportunity for the US side to prepare a meal and prepare the supplies. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Megan, I'm trying to remember where we left it. I think the last time we talked about it, we decided so that it wasn't so stressful that we were going to let the US team make a US meal and then like have Guatemalans make the Guatemalan meal and kind of protect our relationships in that process. So there would be that kind of learning from each other. And then the idea of prayer walks throughout the Santa Maria de Jesus. Also, it's not going to be as satisfying to an American who's used to going and getting stuff done. It's very countercultural. I think there are some small projects so we can have hands-on that we can build into it. For example, we wanted to do a handprint wall with our kids. Well, that's one wall. We could do something like that. Or we need the outside of the building painted. Maybe we could do some of that because it would be out in the street rather than in the center. But really the idea is to move kind of away from that for the 2 trips. And it really would be building relationships and prayer ministry primarily.
The building relationship, like the idea is not that people would be returning to Guatemala on like a yearly or semi-yearly basis, necessarily.
Not necessarily. I mean,
Okay.
fully if they want to. That's awesome.
Totally. Yeah. I think to me, it feels like what the US visitors bring is kind of accountability, I guess, to the organization, and just like that I think probably the vast majority, if not all of our donors come from the US. And I think that like having people come to see the school and everything like that, I think that transparency is kind of a foundational value of Nueva Vida. And I really think that having people come and see the school is a really tangible way to have that transparency. And then I think you guys touch on this in the spiritual aspect too, of like that we're all the family of God, and that like the US visitors kind of and the Guatemalan visitors too, but just the way that we're coming together as cross-cultural people who, as Christians, the way that we embody the church as multi-ethnic, multilingual group. So yeah, that makes sense. I think to me the tension always becomes between the cost that goes into bringing visitors, and just the loss that can feel like if you don't feel like you're participating. And so I guess I also wonder if I don't know about the kind of theology of this, but I guess like that coming as a tourist to a country that doesn't have a lot of tourism opportunity, or that does, but it like, is kind of often on the edge of being viable for tourism or not, that itself can be, I don't know, I guess I just wonder about like ethics of travel and like using your funds to support, I don't know, like if we would try and like patronize Guatemalan owned businesses in some capacity, or like just having, I think that was something that I felt a lot in my time in Guatemala, is that like by bringing people to come visit us that never in a million years would have come to Guatemala otherwise, there's a value in that too, I think. It's basically purely a financial value, but also to some extent a cultural value of like a country that you might have had certain assumptions about maybe ends up being different than you would have thought it was too.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely, to all of that. Well, and we were looking at cultural experiences just to help them understand the Guatemalan culture. And we were looking to find local, like family owned, like
Co-ops
a
and things.
finca or
Mm.
whatever, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, instead of going like to some of the mass, like the Finca Philadelphia, which is a pretty common tourist location, it's just very large, and but thinking maybe it's a coffee farm, but maybe taking our visitors to a smaller coffee farm that's more family oriented, like it's a small family owned coffee finca, and really just kind of investing in some of those smaller, kind of more real and yeah, opportunities to make a bigger impact and invest in.
Yeah, and if there's any opportunity for, I know Megan, you've had people like buy weaving or something from family members, or something like that. Like if there's any opportunity for it to be people from the school, or families involved in the school. I know that can be a little complicated, but just another way to build connection, I think.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be a really cool opportunity. And one of our staff, Mauricio, his family owns a avocado farm. It's like a few miles away from the center, but
Sure.
but I think that would just be a really cool way to introduce to them more to the beauty and the real life lived
Totally.
situations. Mhm.
Yeah.
Um,
Part of the reason too, that I'm a big fan of moving away from the service, like the hands-on service opportunities, is because that's something we could pay a Guatemalan to do,
Sure.
is paint our center. And so by bringing Americans down to paint the center, we're stealing work from Guatemalans. So that really, I struggle with that a lot.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I feel like that's something that's valid to share. Like, I feel like most of the people that are interested in Nueva Vida wouldn't be an offensive thing to share with them, you know, that's part of the
Totally.
rationale.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's well put, stuff that I think that really is the heart of the challenge, the heart of the opposition that we kind of have felt against like the service oriented, and because there are a lot of Guatemalans looking for work, and a lot of our families are looking for work, and I think yeah, it's something that we really want to honor in that too. Yeah, great comments and thoughts, Marianne. I really love it. Thank you. That's why you're here. That's awesome. I'm so grateful. Yeah, great considerations. And I think that's really talking through the ideas and how to, again, what's realistic, how do we communicate about this opportunity in ways that can really connect with people and encourage them to go outside of their comfort zone, because it is very countercultural, and we know that we expect it to be a little bit of a challenge to you know, initially before people really have experienced it, before we really experienced it, you know, to share the good news about this opportunity, and because it looks just so different. But the blessings and benefits, I think, are important and outweigh the challenges. And so we're excited to do that. And your guys' perspective is huge in that, because again, Stephanie and I have been so much in the details and in the weeds that it's so helpful to get a fresh perspective. Like, okay, let's talk about this, and how can we make this work well. So thank you for those conversations, those topics, and those considerations and ideas. I have them written down. Let me share. Oh, we're out of time. Okay. Well, what I'm going to do is then I will send this. I have a document called Mission Retreat. Pretty great name. It talks a little bit about the pre-trip, the during and after trip, and it kind of goes into a little bit more detail of the during the trip, kind of day 1, day 2, kind of, and is guided by specifically the 3 main foci that I mentioned: the spiritual formation, the relationship, and the cultural history. So I'm going to send that to you guys so you guys can have access to that. I'd love it if you guys can review it before we see each other next week. I believe is our next appointment. And kind of review that, just take a look at it. If you don't have time, that's okay, but I would love it. It just could kind of help us advance the conversation. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the logistical pragmatic discussions that we can kind of start teasing out, and how to move forward productively. So I know today was mostly information for me, but I really am excited about just continuing the conversation, hearing from you guys moving forward, and how to make this a good fit. And so thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Mary and Steph. I appreciate
Great
it.
to be here.
Yes. Yeah.
Quick question. Is your document in the same folder with like all the notes from our times with Olivia? Do you know, on Drive?
Yes.
Should we share the whole folder, and then I'll put the
Ooh.
Zoom link
Yeah.
in there as well
Great.
for
Oh, the
this?
video?
And and that way
yes, I mean,
guys
that'd be
can
great.
see
I
some
just
of our
didn't wanna
ramblings.
overload people with too much information or access to too much information at once. So yeah, let's do it that way. Let's send the Google Drive link. I can, if you, well, you have access still, so if you could, would you send that link?
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, once I get that video up, I'll send it out and let everybody know that the video is there too. So
Thanks,
Okay.
Steph.
Yeah.
There is so just so you, since you guys will have access to everything in that little folder, this one is really just called Mission Retreat. So the other one's like Mission Retreat Committee and all these other things, but this you'll find in this document pre-trip, after trip, and during trip, and then a little bit more specifics of the days. So I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Thank you so much. I am grateful for you all, and we'll send the link and the video as soon as possible.
sounds
Okey-doke.
great.
Bye.
Bye.